This is the fourth episode of Poke A Mon, where real science meets the Pokemon universe. I'm Kyuka Wobodo, but you can call me Professor Baobab. My expertise is in science communication. You can sign up to my weekly newsletter below to get access to a free step-by-step guide on how to master any subject, so you can explain it with ease. Disclaimer: this podcast is in no way affiliated with the Pokemon Company, Game Freak, or Nintendo. I am using Pokemon as a pedagogical tool as it pertains to tangential learning. In other words, I tell stories using Pokemon to capture the attention of those interested in Pokemon while remaining integral to the presentation of scientific knowledge. Today, we'll be talking about child development. We'll explore the stages of child development and key theories. When a child develops, they undergo a series of changes physically, cognitively, socially, and emotionally. Various theories have been developed to explain how children grow and learn over time, and they each offer a different perspective or unique insight into the process of child development. No theory is better than the other, but you may favor one over the other. It makes sense that there should be multiple theories, though. Otherwise, it stands to reason we would not need philosophers or multiple religions. As I was researching for this episode, I found a number of parallels with the learning theories I studied while I was completing my PGCE at the University of Manchester. As a teacher, I appreciate how important it can be for a child to develop in a nourishing environment comprising of good parenthood, good education, good people, friends, neighbors, and so on, and much more. Therefore, I intend for the following discussions on the theories of child development to be an illustration of the significance of different contexts and circumstances that can inform a child's development and, ultimately, their future. I'm listing these theories in no particular order. With that, the first theory I'll talk about is called maturationist theory. This was pioneered by an American psychologist, pediatrician, and professor by the name of Arnold Gessel. The theory states that a child's development is mostly predetermined by their DNA. It just so happens that this is my least favorite theory, since it could easily lead to a fixed and even fatalist mindset, where you simply surrender every ambition you have because you have deduced that your fate is already sealed from early on. In short, you see things as happening automatically and in a predictable sequence. For example, if I were to suddenly stop talking, you would assume it was in my nature and a natural consequence for me to do that. Amusingly, this could be a reference to the idea of us being in a simulation where all future events are calculable and all events are programmed to occur at well-defined moments. If we were to view the development of Misty's Togepi in the anime from the lens of the producers of the anime, they knew exactly how Togepi would develop early on in the development from the beginning being the first season of the Pokemon anime, from an egg to a Togepi, and eventually to a Togetic, presumably. According to Arnold's maturationist theory, it would not have mattered if Togepi first saw Ash or Brock, as its genetic data would have determined its adventurous, playful nature regardless. Nobody could have changed its nature. Just like in the Pokemon games, a nature cannot be changed. Nobody could have trained it specifically to develop faster, which would disqualify roles such as move tutor. Moving on, no pun intended, the next theory is behaviorist theory. This one almost completely contradicts the maturationist theory, because this theory states that a child's development is shaped by external stimuli, with behaviors learned through reinforcement and punishment. This rather revolutionary theory was developed by the likes of John Watson and B.F. Skinner. According to this theory, all behaviors are learned through interaction with the environment, primarily through processes like conditioning. There are two main categories of conditioning: classical and operant. In classical conditioning, developed by Ivan Pavlov, famous for Pavlov's dog experiment, a child learns by forming associations between stimuli. Pavlov's experiment, therefore, was that once dogs realized that when a bell chimed, they would get a treat, they began to salivate and anticipate food simply from hearing the bell chime. Meanwhile, operant conditioning, developed by none other than Skinner himself, postulates that behaviors are shaped by consequences. Reinforcement increases the likelihood of a behavior being repeated, while punishment decreases it. In the field of education and effective learning theories, there is a strong suggestion also that reinforcement is much better at achieving desired results than punishment. In the anime, Togepi was always wandering off and finding itself in all manners of perilous situations. However, because Pikachu was always there to safeguard it, Togepi never was hurt. As a result, it would have been conditioned to not expect to be harmed from a hazard or threat. Nevertheless, Togepi has been shown to, perhaps inadvertently, use moves like teleport via metronome to remove itself and others from imminent doom. Of course, operant conditioning can have similarly adverse repercussions in real life. If children are overly protected and never experience the damaging effects of reckless behavior, they will easily begin to believe they can do anything that pleases the reward centers of their brains without understanding they are playing a zero-sum game. In addition, okay, enough with the puns. By the way, this is a segue into the next child development theory. Let me now talk about social learning theory. This can be construed as a development of behaviorist theory because this theory incorporates the role of so-called observational learning. Social learning theory, which was put forward by the Canadian psychologist and Stanford social science professor Albert Bandura, states that a child learns by observing and imitating others. In other words, children learn not only through direct reinforcement, but also by watching and imitating the behavior of others. For instance, Bandura's famous Bobo doll experiment demonstrated that children imitate aggressive behavior they observe in adults, particularly when they see the behavior being rewarded. A Bobo doll is a nearly human-sized, bowling pin-shaped balloon that has a low center of gravity such that it can return to an upright position even if knocked to the point where the doll is nearly parallel with the floor. In one of the experiments, yes, the Bobo doll experiment was actually a series of experiments performed over several years. 3 groups of children aged between 3 and 6 observed an adult. One group observed the adult punching a Bobo doll, using a toy mallet to strike it, and shouting the kind of verbal abuse Blue would use against Red if he saw him trying to catch a piggy. Another group observed a different adult playing non-aggressively with other toys. The third group was a control group. The groups then played with toys until the experimenter said they couldn't play anymore. It is said that hurt people, and when the group that observed violent behavior was left on their own to cope with their frustration of being removed from the playroom, they mimicked every single aggressive behavior they witnessed. On the other hand, the group that observed non-aggression dealt with their frustration non-aggressively. In short, parents act as quintessential role models to their children. From a very tender age, children develop behaviors that mimic the behaviors of those they observe. This is why it is vital to only have children be witness to good behaviors, whether in society, in education. For instance, showing children how fun and rewarding learning can be as soon as possible, etc. Obviously, Misty acts as a mothering figure to Togepi. Nonetheless, it is likely Togepi does not learn by observing. It is possible it has poor eyesight, but it is clear Togepi does not adopt the kind of aggression Misty is known to display towards Ash. This is probably not too far-fetched since... Alright, that was far-fetched, the word, not the Pokemon. Since these are simply theories and not universal truths. Remember, if there was one correct theory, it would have to apply to every developing child without exception. Let's look at a few more theories. This one is called cognitive development theory and was pioneered by Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget. Cognitive development theory posits that children actively create their own understanding of the world as they interact with it. And this understanding evolves in predictable stages. There are 4 stages to it. Once each of the stages are reached, the child is able to use 100% of their human intelligence, according to Piaget. The first stage is called sensory motor. This stage occurs between the ages of 0 and 2 years old. During this stage, children use their 5 senses to understand the world. In desiring to understand the world more completely, children learn to sit, walk, and run. Togepi was always depicted at this stage, or level of intelligence. Of course, Togepi are not humans, so this does not mean that Togepi was necessarily between 0 and 2 years old. Still, most Pokemon seem to possess the uncanny ability to understand a variety of human languages and the languages of other species. And perhaps the anime was between 0 and 2 years old, while Togepi was in the sensory motor stage. The second stage is called pre-operational. This stage occurs when a child is between 2 and 7 years of age. It's called pre-operational because there are certain cognitive operations children are still unable to apply, such as a clear distinction between reality and imagination. This is why many children easily believe that fictional places that are visualized in realistic ways in digital media may truly exist. By the sensory motor stage, children develop a sense of object permanence, which simply means that if a mother hides a toy under the bed, the child will know to look under the bed if they want to play with it. However, children in the pre-operational stage have yet to develop theory of mind, which is the ability to acknowledge that other people may not see things the way you do. The concrete operational stage comes next and occurs when a child is between 7 and 11. Logic and cognitive operations finally become concrete, hence the name of the stage. After having asked 1,000,001 questions during the pre-operational stage, children develop sound reasoning and deductive skills. For example, they would understand that if they see someone eating, that the person is probably hungry and may eat more or drink something later. Alternatively, if they know that if a person adds 5 pens to a collection of 10 pens and later removes 10 pens, there would be 5 pens remaining. This is most likely why formal teaching in the classroom begins during the concrete operational stage. The fourth stage is called the formal operational stage. After the age of 12, children develop a cornucopia of skills involving abstract ideas such as love, revenge, good and evil, human behavior, and even self-ambition. One of these skills is called metacognition and is an important asset for those teaching at secondary schools and beyond. Metacognition is the cognitive ability developed by the formal operational stage to be aware of personal thought processes. It is thinking about thinking. The reason this is valuable in schools is because it can inform teachers about how students reason, what they genuinely know, and what misconceptions or alternative conceptions they may have or be forming. In fact, encouraging students to interact with their thoughts and the thoughts of their peers has been shown to improve not only test scores, but cognitive performance across all areas, concentration, and personal well-being. I'm sure most of you listening to this will be well beyond the age of 12 and wonder if this theory no longer applies to you. Actually, it does. Metacognition is something you can still practice today to enhance your concentration and well-being. Moreover, studies suggest the brain may form nerve cells well into old age in a process known as neurogenesis, which suggests we can make new synaptic connections, thereby allowing us to learn new things. Therefore, the recommendation to improve your ability to improve your metacognition is simply to never stop learning. Try and open a difficult book or take part in an online course and genuinely try to understand the information, grapple with it, and use language, use words to try and understand. For example, by teaching yourself using the so-called Feynman process, or by obviously teaching others, or by simply writing it down in your own words, the information you have learned. So far, I have talked about the maturationist theory, which states that children develop according to their genetic makeup. Then I talked about behaviorist theory, which states that children develop by modeling behaviors. Social learning theory built on behaviorist theory by stating that children learn by observation. That is, when they model behavior, they are learning that behavior and it is becoming a part of their identity or character. Finally, I provided an overview of cognitive development theory, which is marked by important cognitive milestones like object permanence and theory of mind. The following theory is social-cultural theory, which was proposed by the legendary Lev Vygotsky. Before reading much about this, I already had expected it to be my favorite theory since I studied Vygotsky's work rather extensively during my training to become a teacher. Social-cultural theory emphasizes the importance of social context and cultural influences on a child's development. Vygotsky introduced the concept of the zone of proximal development, or ZPD, which refers to the range of tasks a child can perform with guidance, but not yet independently. Although we will soon see that it's not just children, it's not just applicable to children. He argued that cognitive development is largely the result of social interaction, with learning occurring through collaborative processes like scaffolding, where more knowledgeable individuals, teachers, parents, even more knowledgeable children, even more knowledgeable peers, support the child's learning until they can perform tasks independently. I'm a huge fan of this theory because it not only identifies, but also highlights the importance of language, culture, and social interaction in learning. It suggests that parents, teachers, and peers play a crucial role in helping children reach their potential. In practice, this means that learning is a collaborative process and children benefit from guided instruction that challenges them just beyond their current abilities. I would like to expound on that last clause. Children benefit from challenges just outside of their comfort zone. This is the ZPD, Zone of Proximal Development, I mentioned before. The extraordinary thing is that ZPD does not only apply to developing children, nor does it only apply to school students. Indeed, it can apply to anyone, and is colloquially referred to as stepping out of one's comfort zone. This is also vital for achieving a state of absolute absorption in an activity, in a phenomenon dubbed the flow state by Hungarian psychologist Mihály Csikszentmihalyi. In short, when you can focus on a task for which the skills that you need to accomplish that task is proportional to the level of challenge the task creates, you will achieve a sense of enlightenment that literally transcends your perception of time and your physical and cognitive limits. So in sport, you would perform more athletically than you ever thought you could perform, and in learning tasks, you would be able to absorb information almost like a sponge absorbs water. This explains why it is so pressing to push children to do better in a variety of contexts. I'm not saying this to sound extreme. Of course, adequate rest is tantamount to high performance. It's on the same level of importance. Still, I think most people would rather be aspirational, influential, successful, and would want the same for their children, especially if their children are exposed to better and more opportunities. Since Csikszentmihalyi first published his book on flow in 1990, it received a refresh in 2008, and I can certainly recommend the book. While Csikszentmihalyi died in 2021, his legacy lives vividly on in several ventures on uncovering self-actualization. One of these, which I have followed, is by the American entrepreneur Steven Kotler. Let me briefly touch on scaffolding. This is a pedagogical tool, or teaching tool, that is used to help bring children from what they know to what they want to know, or what the person who is doing the scaffolding wants them to know. The reason I'm emphasizing this point seemingly ad nauseum is because the world is transforming much more quickly than we can process, and it's accelerating. The best way to prepare ourselves and our future generations, in my opinion, is by exploiting the ZPD and flow as much as possible to not only ensure we do not fall behind our peers to the extent we will be looked down upon by society, but to enable us to live more responsibly and provide value to others and to the planet. All of this talk on flow and high performance would certainly warrant an episode by itself, but I want to talk about one more child development theory. There are other theories, but I don't want to unnecessarily inflate the scope of this episode. This theory is called attachment theory. I think this theory would apply very well to Misty and Togepi, since attachment theory states that early emotional bonds with caregivers have a profound and lasting impact on a child's emotional and social development. This theory was developed by British psychiatrist John Bowlby and later expanded by American developmental psychologist Mary Ainsworth. Bowlby believed that children are born with an innate need to form attachments, and these early bonds provide a so-called secure base from which children can explore the world. This exactly describes Togepi's relationship with Misty. After all, even though Ash deserved to keep Togepi because he won it over a mini tournament between the two of them and Brock, it was Togepi that decided to be Misty's Pokémon because he was the first person it saw after hatching from the egg. Furthermore, having learned that Misty does not keep it in a Pokéball and allows it to easily leap out of her arms, it is capable of freely exploring the world at will. Ainsworth expanded on attachment theory by introducing 4 different types of attachment. These are secure attachment, where the child feels confident that their caregiver will be there to meet their needs. Insecure avoidant attachment, where the child shows little interest in their caregiver, indicating emotional detachment. Insecure ambivalent attachment, where the child is clingy and dependent, but also rejecting when comforted, indicating confusion or anxiety. And perhaps I fell in this category for some period of time. And insecure disorganized attachment, where the child displays inconsistent or erratic behavior, often linked to trauma or neglect. Togepi cleanly fit into the secure attachment. Ash's Charizard could have fallen under insecure avoidant attachment. Still, we clearly see Togepi had everybody rooting for it. Pikachu always ensured it was not harmed. Misty and Brock always cared for it, made sure it had something to eat and a safe place to sleep, even though they were always on the move. And Ash was there to protect it from the immediate threat of intense Pokemon battles and Team Rocket. Talk about a perfect trio. Altogether, we discussed 6 theories: maturationist theory, behaviorist theory, social learning theory, cognitive development theory, social cultural theory, and attachment theory. Again, there are other child development theories. However, I do also want to point out that my overviews of these theories were not exhaustive, and there are certainly entire books to be written about each of these individual theories. After all, they are theories, they're not just hypotheses that an undergraduate developed for their coursework. If you've come this far into the episode, please consider liking this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. This will help me tremendously and costs nothing but a few moments of your time. You can find the resources I consulted while researching for this episode in the show notes. Isn't the power of science simply amazing?